Good morning. Oh, bear with me. I've got a terrible whistle in one of my ears. I don't think it's me. I think it's the sound. Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all well. Hope you're not suffering from electronic tinnitus this Tuesday morning. It's the budget in the UK tomorrow, as I'm sure most of you are aware. It will be happening after tomorrow's show, so won't be able to react to it quite so quickly. But my plan is to do something kind of budget related on Thursday, if you're up for that kind of thing. I'm going to say good morning to Dan Cullen, to Mark Whiting, and to Jim Turner, who've just joined us over on the main part of the show. Good morning to everybody. Pablo Diaz over on Instagram, and Marcel and Tal over there as well. Max OG3 over on Instagram. Lots and lots of people tuning in. Jim Turner says it'll be a Roger Whittaker. Would you care to elaborate on that, please, Jim? Love to hear from you. Chris Rawls here as well. Morning, Chris. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Incidentally, it's too late to buy it now. Well, you can still buy it, but you won't get your name in the dedications. We've shut up shop on the Halloween story now, but that will be coming out on Thursday this week. And because he helped me basically flesh out the idea in the first place, the book's main character is called Gary, after Gary Muirhead, who is a regular on the show. I've also written another one in the background, just because I had an idea in mind. That's the subject of that story is somebody called Chris. Again, I just lack imagination. Well, that's not strictly true. I can come up with story ideas. I just can't come up with story or character names. So I just basically raided our usual show and decided, yes, our new character. It's about somebody that's rendered out of work. Not that I'm wishing that on you, Chris, but yes, our next character, or the next character in my next book. It's an ebook. It's a little one. We'll be selling that very, very cheaply. He's going to be called Chris, just so you'd like to know. Ken Hatcher is here as well. Good morning to you, Ken. Hope you're fitting well, my friend. I've got lots and lots to get through today. One thing, we've got an unusual situation today in that I've had a couple of videos come through, one from Wacker and one from Bobcat, and they're kind of comparative. We don't often, I mean, we kind of do hot or not. Here's one machine. Do you think it's hot or not? But these are both telescopic handlers at the smaller end of the range. So I'd like you to have a look at those and see what you think. So now I've got you all fired up and ready to do that. I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and I'm going to get this show on the road, starting right now. Going to go back to the chat very quickly. I know who Roger Whittaker was. I'm just not entirely sure why being a famous whistler has got anything to do with the budget. Maybe that's Jim and I are two people separated by a single language sometimes. Jim, what are you going on about? And Chris Ford says, hope the book has a happy ending. Not really. I mean, happier than the one that's coming out in 2 days' time, but no, not really. Don't really do happy endings, so for that I can only apologise. It is Tuesday, the 29th of October. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. The Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, I've already said this, we've got a rare opportunity to compare and contrast two new and competing machines, one from Bobcat, one from Wacker Neuson. So look forward to that. We're going large, very large, in fact, with the Komatsu PC 7000 mining excavator. And we have a battery drill like you've never seen before. And I'm just going to say a very quick good morning to our friend Mick, who's just joined us. Mick, please make sure you stick around for the after-show monologue, because I think you have the ability to read between the lines to see precisely who and what I'm talking about. Speaking of the morning monologue, we're going to be discussing how market dominance of one or two major brands and companies can stifle competition and innovation. It's kind of a follow-on from yesterday's. But before we get to all of that, we do need to concern ourselves with the small matter of today's mystery machine. So I'll be back after all this. So yes, Mystery Machine. It looks like this. Yeah, that's what we're looking for today. I need from you a make and a model, if you would be so kind. I'll leave you to give that some consideration. While you're doing that, let me very quickly remind you of today's question of the day, which looks like this. Yeah, question of the day. Let me try that again. Question of the day today is this. What was, somebody's kind of queered this slightly, but what was your favourite year? Somebody's gone ahead. But personally, I've got a bunch. 1990, the year I got married, that was a pretty good year. 1991, when my first daughter was born, that was a pretty good year too. But on reflection, I'm going to go with 1982. I was at college then, had a newfound freedom, could come and go as I pleased. I had a girlfriend. Whatever happened to her, I wonder. The music and the fashion were amazing. And that was the first year I went on an overseas, I went on an overseas holiday, and I went on holiday on my own. Well, without my parents, I went with a mate, but great fun was had by all. I remember some of it. It was a good holiday. So I'm going for 1982. Jim Turner, however, is going for 2078, when he will be celebrating his 100th birthday. Yeah. Jim, I promise you now, you will have this in writing, by the way. Well, in video form. If I am still around in 2078, it doesn't feel likely. I promise to send you a birthday card. I promise to send you a birthday card. Chris Ford, yes, we're talking about the other book that's coming out, little ebook, is called Echoes of Dust, and it doesn't have a particularly happy ending. And Chris Ford says, could be the story of my life. It hasn't ended yet. If it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. I know that feeling. Mystery Machine. Let's go back to the Mystery Machine. Jim Turner reckons it could be a Bomag roller. It's not a Bomag. And it's not a roller, but thank you for the guess. Dan Cullen reckons it could be a Cat 993 tractor. It is not one of those. Dan Cullen also reckons it could be a Komatsu SK820-8. It is none of those. Oh, excuse me. It's none of those things. Let me show you a smidge more. There you are. And Dan is also going for a Komatsu SK815. Not a Komatsu. Keep the guesses coming in if you would be so kind. I'm going to take that away, and we'll crack on, because, as I said, we've got the ability to compare and contrast today. See how you think these fare against each other. Back after this. I'll tell you in advance, I'm kind of torn on this one, because I'm a huge, I think you already know, I'm a huge fan of Bobcat, but I'm also a huge fan of Wacker Neuson. So I'm going to show you a pair of videos, one from Bobcat, one from Wacker Neuson, both featuring compact telescopic handlers, and I'll leave you to decide which one you would prefer. If you're about to spend your hard-earned cash, which one would you prefer? And here is the first for you to look at. This is Bobcat. Okay, hold that thought, because that's obviously the Bobcat offering. We've got a couple of more guesses here on the Mystery Machine. Dan Cullen actually reckons it could be Mystery Machine could be a Bobcat T650 or an S450, as if I would feature a Mystery Machine from the same brand I was featuring on the show. As if I'd do that. I'm not doing that. It's neither of those things. Let me show you a bit more. There you are. I'm going to play you the other film in just a moment, but just before I do that, I want to say congratulations to Jim Turner, who, as of about 10 minutes ago, I think, just uploaded his 100th YouTube video. Yeah, if you're not following Jim already, Jim, post the link in the chat, would you? And go and follow, go and subscribe, because he's doing some good stuff. I'll be back with the other part of the telescopic handler equation in just a moment.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, I've already said I kind of hover between these two brands, because I think both are very, very innovative. Both have a slightly skewed and therefore much more enjoyable way of looking at the world of construction equipment. So we've seen what Bobcat have got to offer, and this is what Wacker Neuson have got to offer. You decide, which one would you prefer? So, if you were spending your hard-earned cash on a compact telehandler, which one would you prefer? Are you going Bobcat or Wacker Neuson? While you're doing that, let me put this back on a display. There you are. There's our Mystery Machine as it stands today, or as it stands right this moment. Let me show you a bit more, because we've not had a correct guess as yet. Any thoughts on that? Love to get you... Okay, Jim, I'm going to put Jim's comment up here. Thanks for presuming I'm savvy enough to post a link in the chat, but sadly I'm not. This tech crack is not my area of expertise. Okay, well, I think I've got a slightly longer film coming up. I have. Jim, leave it with me. I will go and find the link. Don't worry about it. Dan Cullen reckons our machine could be a Toyota Husky. Don't even know what a Toyota Husky is. It sounds interesting, but it's not one of those. It is a very well-known brand, but nobody's got even close yet. So keep the guesses coming in. Let me take that away, and I'll fire this up, and then when I start the next film, I'll give you the link to Jim's YouTube channel 1 second after this. Chris Ford says, being a tightwad, whichever was cheapest to own and run over its life, taking resale value into account. I think they'd both be pretty good on resale value, actually. Both top-notch brands. So, yeah, anybody else got anything to offer on our telescopic handlers from Bobcat or Wacker, please let us know. Now, obviously, we started the show with back-to-back compact machines. So, by way of balance, let's go large, shall we?
We build machines that not only meet today's society's needs, but also anticipate the demands of tomorrow. Our gentle giants extract the essential minerals that fuel modern life. As pioneers in electrification, we are committed to mining these minerals with less emissions, without compromising on performance, cost, or mobility. Here in Canada, an electric PC 7000 can save up to 79% emissions from well-to-wheel compared to a diesel machine. Under optimal conditions, emissions can even be reduced by 95%. And still, the machine is as mobile as its diesel version. The automatic cable drum allows the machine to maneuver flexibly without manual handling of the cable. Stairways and emergency exits on the left, right, and out of the engine house ensure state-of-the-art safety measures with optimized comfort. ComVision, together with the ComTrax Plus upgrade in the operator's cabin, and the new Komatsu controller-based electrical system, reduce downtime, enhance machine capabilities, and maximize product life. Whether as a backhoe or face shovel, the 38 cubic meter bucket is optimized to load all trucks from 200 to 320 short tons, and that in just 3 to 5 passes. Under optimal conditions, this allows for an actual production of more than 6,000 metric tons per hour. Our electric machines are not only heavily competitive, but also minimize costs. Compared to a diesel unit, the TCO of a PC 7000-11 electric is up to 50% cheaper. Purchase price, service labor, lubricants, and spare parts are significantly lower. Power consumption costs can even be reduced by up to 73%. This way, our gentle giants continue to drive sustainable mining, today and in the future, to enable modern-day society. Creating value together.
Yeah, smart looking machine. Who else do we have here? Yeah, Footy has just arrived. Morning, Footy. Good of you to join us. Good news on your job. When do you start? Remind me. Dan Cullen reckons that our mystery machine could be a John Deere skid steer. That's what it looks like. It is not a John Deere skid steer. Our friend Mick reckons it could be a Case 280B. Only one I know. It's not one of those either. And I was asking, would you choose a Bobcat or a Wacker when it comes to telescopic handlers? Chris Ford said he would choose the cheapest, and Jim Turner is in full agreement. Bingo, Chris, that's about the top and bottom of it. I think you're absolutely right. And just speaking of Jim, you can find a link to Jim's excellent new YouTube channel. Well, I say new YouTube channel. He's got 100 videos up there, which is pretty good going. Most people fall away by, most people don't even make it to a dozen videos. So the fact that he's done 100 shows a degree of commitment that is lacking in the industry and the world, I would say. Dan Cullen reckons our mystery machine could be a JCB 155 HD. It's not. He also reckons it could be a Case 410. It's not. Footy says, I'm in for this week driving the 14-ton Volvo, doing deep drainage trench boxes. Next week I'm on a 25-tonner, hopefully doing muckaway. Good luck on all your ventures, Footy. Let me show you a bit more of our mystery machine before I crack on. I think we've already figured out what type of machine it is. I just need a make and a model, if you would be so kind. Yes, I've got one more video to show you, and then I'm going to get into the morning monologue. And it kind of leads you to read between the lines a bit. You're all savvy enough for that. I'll be back in just a second.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Now, I said at the top of the show I was going to feature a battery drill. Obviously, we don't do small tools on this show because they're quite dull. And I know when you think about a battery drill, you probably think of something from, I don't know, Hilti or something like that. We're talking something a bit different than that.
My name's Paul Linnebury. I'm the electrification manager for Barminco. Barminco chose to invest in the DL422IE because we really want to be industry leading, and this drill was the first of its kind in Australia and the first of its kind with the automation package and the battery electric vehicle driveline.
The success of the implementation was the collaboration between Sandvik and Barminco first and foremost. We did the initial understanding of what the machine's capabilities were, and with that application team within Sandvik, we were able to create simulations to best show how we could move the machine around the mine at its best efficiency.
We have a close partnership with Sandvik. They provide a service for us, whether it's drill consumables. We have our assets through Sandvik, and also they do provide us with field services as well.
The difference between the classic diesel operated machines and this battery operated rig is certainly a lot less maintenance on the carrier side of the machine, lot less maintenance in the engine side of things, as it doesn't have one. We simply charge them and discharge them, and they pretty well look after themselves.
DL422IE is fully capable of drilling on full power without being connected to main network for about 30 to 40 minutes, and is capable of completing 30 meters drilling and uncoupling. The biggest benefits that DL422IE brings on the table is the simplicity in design and integration of user interface between manual and automation drilling.
Being able to drill from the surface was one of the big reasons why we purchased this drill, and we are seeing significant productivity benefits from that.
Using the teleremote system that we have here on the 422IE, we add the auto bit on, and we do not have to change that bit over the shift change period or any extended time of teleremote drilling. So we can use teleremote bogging, teleremote drilling, all in the same area.
From the safety aspect and sustainability, not using diesel, having zero emissions really benefits both site and the people operating underground.
It has honestly been quite a game changer with the industry. It has increased our productivity within the workshop.
We'll continue using these drills into the future, and we think that there's opportunity for them going forward across our other sites.
Yeah, there you are. Ken Hatcher says, wow, a lot of technology there. Yep, there certainly is a lot of technology there. Mick says, how come all these blokes never have a bit of oil or grease on their shirts? I think you know the answer to that. I can tell you, basically, when we go out to film people, the call goes ahead. Make sure you look clean and tidy. And new PPE is handed out to all and sundry so that everybody looks spick and span. That really happens. Perfect application for electric machines. I totally agree, Jim. Now, we do have a winner. I've got to be honest. There were, well, this month's mystery machine has already been won. Dan Cullen has won it for the third month on the trot. So we already knew the outcome. But I was literally sat here. I was about 3/4 of the way through that film thinking, well, I'm going to win today because nobody's got it. And along comes, the right answer. Dan Cullen initially went for the New Holland L334. It's not. Chris Ford at the same time was going for the Manitou 220R. It's not one of those. It was, in fact, one of those. So Dan, just rounding off the fact that he's been absolutely dominant this month, he gets the right answer. It is indeed a Cat 242D3. And here it is, just to prove it to you. There you are. I thought the black might throw people off. It threw everybody off, apart from Dan, because he knows his stuff. I remember a Sandvik hacksaw blade in saws in school. Yeah. I don't know if they're still in that game, but yes, Sandvik saw blades were very much a thing. Right, that pretty much wraps up the main. Good Lord. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around, then do please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. And I hope to see you again very, very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back in just a moment with our morning monologue. Back in a sec. Right, let me round this out because I'm going to go and concentrate on the morning monologue in just a second. Dan Cullen says, lol, looks cool, little cat. Like that. I agree. Jim Turner says, no wonder I've never been asked to be on film. I need always have holes in my clothes, oil, mark and grease on me somewhere, and my Viz vest is cut off. Yeah, but listen, I'm of the belief, I always think that whenever you see machines at exhibitions, they've got no dirt on their tyres or their tracks. It's not real, is it? And there is a major manufacturer. I will get to the morning monologue in just a second, but there is a major manufacturer. They don't do it anymore as far as I know. But back in the day, they used to have these very, very fancy-looking adverts, full-page adverts in some of the magazines. And you'd see a machine in a quarry or on top of a mountain or whatever it might be. And the tracks and the tyres were always absolutely spotless. And I used to think, how did they do that? Did they get somebody to go in and clean it off before they photographed it? Nope. They used to take one machine after another into a huge green screen studio somewhere, photograph them all, and then drop them onto a background. So yes, don't believe everything you see. Don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you hear. Right. Now, having set that up, the morning monologue. Now, if you were here yesterday, you may recall that my morning monologue yesterday looked at how difficult it has become to become a startup company in the field of demolition. Not just demolition, but demolition in particular. After the show, I did my usual thing. I fed our chat through my pet AI and produced a podcast based upon our discussion of that topic. And as is often the case these days, the AI proved remarkably insightful, throwing a spotlight onto elements of my monologue that I hadn't even considered. So today, I'm going to partly revisit that subject to look at some of the other negative effects of what kind of amounts to monopolization. So, here we go. It's easy to think that monopolies are just something from economics textbooks or dusty business seminars. But monopolization is more than that. For one thing, a monopoly within an industry doesn't necessarily mean that the sector spotlight is hogged by just one company. It often means that a small handful of companies exert a dominance over the industry. Against that background, a monopoly acts like a very slow form of erosion. It chips away at everything good that the industry once had. It's like this creeping fog that rolls in, covering every corner, and before you know it, you're left with something cold, impersonal, and unrecognizable. When one or more companies dominates an industry, it may seem efficient at first. You get economies of scale, they say. One or two big companies means more streamlined processes, right? But that is a facade. Beneath that, the roots are rotting. See, once a monopoly is in place, the industry doesn't need to fight for quality or innovation. It's like there's no one left to compete with. The pressure to be better, the drive to improve, these things fall away when you're the only game in town. Quality starts to nosedive. Nope, sorry, I was going to sneeze. Quality starts to nosedive, often in these subtle, almost invisible ways. Prices edge up slowly but surely because there's no incentive to keep them competitive. Why would they? You're the only option, so you'll pay what they charge. But you know what's worse than the prices or even quality? It's the stifling of ideas. The newcomers, the dreamers, the underdogs who have these fresh perspectives, they get locked out. Monopolies hate competition. They hate risk too. So they build these walls, barriers that block anyone who might dare to disrupt the status quo. Sometimes it's the high startup costs or the legal hoops they're forced to jump through, which often they can't afford. Sometimes it's just downright ugly tactics, lawsuits, restrictive practices, exclusive contracts. For the workers, it's even more grim. When there's only a handful of big players, employment choices shrink dramatically. The power balance tilts entirely to the employer's side. Wages stagnate because where else are you going to go? Job security becomes an illusion. Benefits shrink, workloads rise, and the culture becomes impersonal and indifferent. And worst of all, there's no accountability. In a competitive industry, if one company mistreats its workers, people can leave for a rival. But in a monopolized field, that option disappears, trapping workers in an unhealthy cycle. And what happens to the innovators? They're left on the sidelines watching their vision fade. And it's tragic because the people, let me try that again. It's tragic because these people would otherwise bring new life into the industry. Think about it. Newcomers are generally hungry. They're determined, willing to take risks and push boundaries. They're the ones who aren't weighed down by the way you think. They're not weighed down by the way we've always done things. They're the ones who think, why not try this? Why not make things better, cheaper, faster? But under monopoly conditions, those voices go unheard, and their potential dies quietly in the dark. And the biggest irony of that is those that now sit atop an industry sector often started as the disruptors themselves. They grew by shaking things up, by being daring and innovative. But once they'd established dominance, they became the exact thing they once opposed. They stopped taking risks, stopped pushing boundaries. Innovation becomes a buzzword, not an actual practice. So the industry stagnates, bogged down by outdated processes and services that haven't really evolved in years. Any real progress becomes the stuff of press releases and marketing spin rather than actual, tangible improvements. When just a few companies dominate the market, those industries lose any meaningful collaboration and cross-pollination of ideas. If a monopolized industry has too much say in its sector, it can start influencing policies and regulations. And when regulations are crafted with just one or two companies' interests in mind, it chokes innovation across the board. Barriers go up, not just to block competitors, but to reshape entire markets in ways that only serve the monopoly's interests. Everyone else is left scrambling just to keep up. Now, I get it. Monopolies don't spring up overnight. And to be fair, they're not always this evil entity lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it's just a matter of circumstances. Maybe they had the right product or service at the right time. Maybe they genuinely innovated. But once they reach the top, that focus changes. Instead of innovating, they start preserving, building walls around their territory. And then they start lobbying, pressing policymakers to create regulations that favour them and keep competitors out. It's a sad and bitter irony, though, because the very thing that made the industry dynamic, exciting, and full of potential is killed off by monopolisation. When you kill competition, you kill the energy, the drive, and the momentum. All the little companies, the startups and their bright-eyed founders and their audacious dreams, they wither before they've even had a chance to grow. And without them, the industry grows stale, complacent, and lifeless. Monopolies don't just damage the industry. Monopolies don't just damage the industry. Monopolies don't just damage the industry they dominate. They damage the entire ecosystem around them. They damage the lives of their workers, the experiences of their customers, and the fabric of the sector they're supposed to serve. When an industry becomes monopolized and raises walls to block newcomers, it creates a culture of good enough and of stagnation. And once that fog of monopolization settles in, it's hard to see just how vibrant, dynamic, and truly human the industry once was. Okay, let's have a look. Right, Ken Hatcher is going back to work. I was talking about monopolies. Chris Ford, thank you, Chris. Go to jail, don't pass go. Yeah, well, listen, go to jail. It's only a matter of time, surely. Mick says, never forget when McGee got Wembley. Was at a do at the Dorchester and sat near the top table. Heard the top boys talking and it disgusted me. Those at the top made the decision and I suspect they got something out of it. So a monopoly at work. Told you Mick could read between the lines, didn't I? And listen, I'm not going to skewer away. We all know what happened with the CMA investigation. So that's one form of monopolization and that kind of thing. That's one form. But the other point that I mentioned in that chat was this notion. I'll come to Jim's point because Jim's got an equally good point. When you think about the power wielded by, in the industry that I serve most regularly, demolition, think about the power wielded by the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. As an actual trade association, their influence is waning. But because they have ties with the HSE, with the Environment Agency and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and think about also the National Demolition Training Group, effectively you've got the upper echelons of the industry basically sat around a table deciding the future for the industry. Now, are they deciding that for the common good, or are they deciding that for their own personal good? Not necessarily their personal gain. You know, if you are one of the driving forces behind the NDTG, for example, you don't stand to gain financially because the money will go to the National Demolition Training Group. But if imagine the NDTG tomorrow said, never mind the MVQs, we're going to have a new system that only our members can abide by, and it's going to cost you £5,000 per person per year. They could effectively starve out the smaller players in the industry. If they've got the ear of maybe Build UK and they decide to really up the ante on training, they could starve out part of the industry entirely. That's the point I'm making. And on the same subject, let's have a look. Peter McKenna, what are you talking about a board game for? Yes, very well done. Yes, the need for CPCS NPOS cards puts monopoly on our industry, and all the firms that sign up to each standard squeeze everyone else out. And it hasn't helped raise standards or site safety. A proper government enforced sites, excuse me, a proper government enforced site driving license would be better for everything and everyone. There's been a lot of talk. Obviously, we are on the last knockings of the old grandfather rights system with the CSCS card. So no great surprise. I think some people are literally just coming to realise that there is going to be a big problem in the next couple of months. Or the next month, next 2 months, because it happens in December. And I don't think it's been communicated particularly well and so on down the line, but people are now waking up to the fact that they will require an MVQ in order to maintain the card that they've had for 20, 30 years. Nobody has fought that at all. And why? Why, you ask? Why has nobody fought it? When you think about who is the most likely to fight it, the training providers. Who earns most from training? The training providers. Who stands to gain most from going from grandfather rights to an MVQ qualification? The training providers. It's a term I find myself using an awful lot on this show, but turkeys don't vote for Christmas, do they? Why would a training organisation fight a change in policy that will see them line their own pockets? Never going to happen. Peter says, I came at the right time, passes Mark a new set of teeth. They don't fit particularly well, I'm afraid, but yeah. Craig from CSW Groundworks. Morning, Craig. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Dan Cullen says, the problem is we can do nothing about this. Unfortunately, by and large, you're right. You're right. I hate to say it. You know, this is the point where fear not, my audience, for I have a cunning plan. I don't. Think about this as well. This switch to away from grandfather rights to MVQ. Think about the timing of it. It will come into force pretty much precisely 1 month after tomorrow's budget, in which, in all likelihood, we will all be told about the period of extreme austerity we're about to enter. We already know that we're in the midst of a huge skill shortage. We have a brain drain with lots of older people now retiring, and the MVQ system will only push more people into that. We've also got the government, the incumbent government. I mean, they didn't come up with this idea, but they'll inherit it. This current government is putting its weight behind more house building. Think about that. Just take a step back from that and think about it. We need 1.5 million new homes over the next decade or so. You know, I realise he's a politician and what he says is largely bullshit, but that is the platform upon which Keir Starmer was elected. 1.5 million new homes to make sure everybody has got a viable place to live. At the same time, we are forcing more people into early retirement because of this switch to the MVQ. We've got a skill shortage because we haven't got enough young people coming through the door. And we're about to enter a period of austerity. There will be employers out there that will say, MVQ, yeah, we'll send our lads off. You know, we'll swallow the cost of that. Not a problem at all. How many people out there are self-employed and working through agencies that will be impacted by this switch from grandfather rights to an MVQ? And I think off the top of my head, the cost is about 1,500 quid a person. You know, if you have just been told by your Prime Minister and by the Chancellor of the Exchequer that you're about to enter a period of extreme austerity, are you going to find 1,500 quid between now and Christmas that isn't allocated to the turkey and the stuffing and all the trimmings and the present for your wife or your kids. Are you going to do that? Can you do that? My guess is you probably can't. It would seem though that the Grandfather Right saga is just merely a video interview, not an actual test as such. Still a cost though. Mick says, over the years I've watched the demolition game tear itself to pieces, and the body that was supposed to represent it sat on its collective arse and was only interested in screwing the boys on the ground. I wish I could argue with that. I have a narrow window of hope. In about 3 weeks' time, the Institute of Demolition Engineers gets a new president. That new president will be Adrian McLean at Armac. A proper demolition man's demolition man. The real deal. I realise that the IDE wields way less influence than the NFDC does. I think that situation has been engineered in that direction. But there was a time, the presidency of Dr. Terry Quarmby leading into the presidency of John Woodward. The two of those together, there was a golden age of the IDE where the IDE had real clout and heft and innovation and ideas. There's a bit of me that genuinely believes that as of the 15th of November, we could be entering another phase of that. Now, whether the IDE can, regrow itself, reinvent itself under Adrian McLean's presidency, time will tell. He's the right man for the job, no question about it. But the industry so desperately needs that now. I don't get any information out of the NFTC at all these days. Apparently I'm on some sort of media blacklist. Fuck them, don't care. But I did, just to be absolutely sure that I wasn't missing anything, I had a look at their website day before yesterday. And they haven't announced any news of any description since September. Bearing in mind, I do this every single day, and I've always got too much to cram into an hour or 2 hour show because the industry is that fast moving. There's always something going on, whether it's equipment related, legislation related, whether it's changes in the industry itself, whatever it might be. There is a constant flow of information. And the NFDC hasn't updated its website, or it's the new section of its website, in about 6 weeks. Out of touch, which, as I say, gives me a very narrow window of hope that the IDE under Adrian McLean's guidance could actually fill the gap that they have decided to leave. Peter McKenna says, if everyone down tools, you could make a stand down, but you won't get solidarity within the industry. And therein lies the issue. You won't get solidarity unless... Think about... You have to say the situation that has been created. Now, whether anybody actually sat down with a grand plan back in the 60s, 70s or 80s to steer the industry this way, I don't know. If they did, they were nothing short of a genius. Imagine you get the top of the industry to all sit around, chat to each other, and then they decide, actually, we're going to start our own training organization so that we can control what training is provided and how much it costs. And we will also have a couple of pet MPs, so we can also dictate or influence the way in which legislation is implemented and the way it's imposed upon us. If you wanted to build a barrier around a certain bit of the industry, that is precisely how you would do it. And as I say, whether it was done deliberately or whether it's just a matter of circumstance or happenstance, whatever the reason, it's worked a treat. It's worked an absolute treat, even down to, there was a time, and I don't know whether they've changed the rules or whatever it might be, but the National Demolition Training Group used to have a clause within its terms and conditions or its articles of association, whatever they are, that there would always be somebody from a non-NFDC member on the board to make sure that, to add some balance, to make sure that, the bigger companies weren't imposing unreasonable demands upon the smaller companies. I haven't had that in years. That was pushed to one side. Peter McKenna says that's the same as the Road Haulage Association in the transport industry. Some debacle sham associations that do naffle for the working men. There is the biggest issue. I know we're going to be talking about that after. Well, I'm going to do it in just a second because Mick has mentioned Keir Starmer. Despite the fact that Labour was always seen as the party of the working men, when was the last time anybody genuinely stood up for the working man? I'm thinking Arthur Scargill, maybe? Is that 79, 80? 44 years ago. It's a long while. It's a long while to go unrepresented, isn't it? And particularly when you think about the way that the industry is weighted. I mean, I was talking about industries in general, though obviously, I do have my thing with the demolition industry. If you think the demolition industry is made up of maybe 500, 550 companies, maybe a few less now because we've lost a few, that means we've got 500-ish managing directors or company owners. We've got 500 or thereabouts financial directors, but we've got 30,000 working men. So why are the working men and women of the industry not represented? Why don't they get to have their say? Jim Turner says, I know this is the case as I had developers land buyer a look over my land. He said it would be 10 to 15 years and said it would be eligible for planning. But if I could get all my neighbours on board, they'd be interested now, as it would make a big estate and that a few developers could be building on. All set up for the big businesses and fuck the SME. Yeah. Mick says, did you watch that smug sod Starmer give me speech yesterday? He gave me the impression he was talking down to everyone. I caught bits of it. I only caught the highlights, but I don't even believe there were many highlights. But I think that's the way politicians are, isn't it? And in some ways, it's kind of reflective of the conversation we're having. I do believe, there probably are, and I'm not suggesting that Keir Starmer is one of them, but there probably are some people that go into politics for all the right reasons. I'm not happy with the status quo, and I in order to change it, I need to be part of the establishment, and then I can influence from within. There must be a few. I don't know how many MPs we've got in the country, but there must be a few that have stood on a platform and said, I don't like the way that this is being done. I need to take up arms, not literally, but take up arms and stand for something, whatever it might be. And they are elected as an MP. And then once they're elected as an MP, how many manage to maintain and retain that fight, that bite, that vitriol that put them into the situation in the first place? And it's exactly the same as this. We could have demolition companies, we could have construction equipment companies who came to the market. We're going to turn the world on its arse. We're going to do this brand new thing. We're going to forge new paths. We're going to innovate, and we're going to create new ways of doing things. But now on the top of the industry, stop the innovation because this suits me just about fine. Peter McKenna says, I can't see a problem. The construction industry is the same as many other industries whereby you have to pay out to work HGV drivers, forklift truck drivers, fishing industry. The pay-to-work schemes are rife. Yeah, I've never worked out exactly what the proper definition of the word slavery is. Is it that you are forced to do unpaid labour? In which case, what I'm about to say, I'll stand corrected on. But surely if you are forced to pay in order to work, it might not be slavery, but it's not right, is it? I've said this before. My son came straight out of school, was offered a job selling shower heads, primarily to hairdressers. They've got this fancy shower head, does all these different settings, a massage one, and it was bollocks, basically. It was a scam. But he was invited along to this interview. And the company, they had a proper place in an industrial estate. I drove in there to check them out, make sure they were okay. And he went in, he came out, and he was absolutely full of it. Oh, they've this product, and it does this, it does that. And, I'll have a territory of my own and stuff. I said, oh, okay. And, what about wages? Yeah, there isn't any wages. The way it works is I buy a stock of these shower heads, and then I go door to door of the hairdressers around the region. And if I sell them, I get to... It's an easy argument. I just said, well, that's a scam, mate. That's not a job. That's a scam. That's... Let's make this nice and easy. That's a scam. How is that any different to being forced to do an MVQ or an HGV? Not an HGV. You want to make sure your HGV drivers are good because they're on the roads in massive bloody vehicles. But, should you be paying to work? Incidentally, I caught a bit of an old Billy Connolly video last night, just on the subject of HGVs, because he was talking about it. He said he was talking about sort of wokeism and stuff. And one of the things he was talking about was reversing warnings on trucks. He was woken at 5 o'clock in the morning by a truck going, beep, beep, beep. Looked out the window, and sure enough, it was a truck reversing. It was a truck reversing at 5 o'clock in the morning in an empty street at about 3 miles an hour. However, the same HGV in a couple of minutes' time will be on a motorway doing 70 miles an hour forward. No warning that's coming. Seems weird, doesn't it? Let's have a look. Dan Collins going back to work. Not a problem. Dan, have a good day. Jim Turner says small local companies building on a street by street basis. Using local tradesmen, local supplies is better for the local economy. 10 separate streets being built in various places around a town is better than one big estate. It means natural growth of schools, doctors, dentists, and shops, etc. It's also a more environmentally friendly way to build too. Yeah, and even that part of the system is broken. I've said this before. We moved into a new build 20 odd years ago. Moved into a new build. There weren't enough school spaces. Thankfully, by the time my children were old enough to start school, there were, but there was no school spaces. The doctor's surgery was inadequate. The local ambulance service didn't even know we existed. The telephone, we had to wait. I think we lived there for 3 weeks without a telephone line. Sodding great estate, 300 homes, probably homes to 1,000 plus people. And it's BT were like, oh, you want telephones? By the time we got a telephone, we'd already had a documentation through from Sky to say, cable TV, cable TV. Cable TV apparently is more of a necessity than an ambulance or a telephone. Go figure. Peter McKenna says, that's life, ain't it, Jim? A lad I know wanted to build 2 houses on his land and couldn't get planning permission. He sold his house and land to a local contractor who then got planning permission to build a small housing community on the land behind the house. Yeah, that's the way it works. Mick Norton is in our midst as well. Good morning to you, Mick. Dan Cullen says, exactly. It's every man for themselves here. No one has your back in this industry. How sad is that? How sad is that? Because that wasn't how it was. That wasn't how it was. And our friend Mick goes back way, way longer than I do. Sorry, Mick, but you do. But even in my time, the last 30, 35 years in the demolition industry, there was a time in my memory where there was a working for a greater good. There was a camaraderie. There was a supporting your demolition brother or sister. There was genuinely. Not now. Not now at all. I wonder who pushed that aside. I have a feeling someone rocked the boat for the NFDC and it was not liked. Yeah, I wonder. Regards training. The NFDC, CITB, CSCS, CPCS, MPAWS are all voluntary. The only legal requirement is for the employer to deem the employee competent, QED. But that's that's how you control it, isn't it? You know, when it's not a legal requirement, but if you want to work on a site run by a Build UK member company, and they are the biggest tier 1 contractors, mostly are members of Build UK. If you want to work on one of their sites, you need to abide by the rules and regulations that they have laid down in terms of competence cards, which cards they accept, which cards they don't. And that is compounded still further by the NFDC, or we must have CCDO cards. And when you look at the fundamentals of the CCDO card, somebody operating a skid steer loader on a groundworks project is different to someone operating a skid steer loader on top of a 22-story building. I fully understand that. But when you then use that vehicle to basically close ranks and make sure that everybody abides by your rules and pays your rates of training and your rates to get your card, that's a different thing entirely. I've never seen anyone stand up for the workers in construction. Look at rail, nurses, etc. They have people representing them. Yeah, they do. The Monopolies Commission needs to take blame and have a look at who is on it. Why is there only one of those? I know it's an old joke, but why? Why is there only one of those? Scargills, cut from the same cloth as Starmer, both deep-rooted communists. Ignore what they did in the foreground. Look at the long-term damage they are creating. Listen, I am 100% in agreement with that. I wasn't saying I was a Scargill fan. If anything, I was completely on the opposite side in that argument. But the miners were getting a really, really raw deal, and at least somebody stood up. I mean, the guy, what's the fella's name that's standing up for the rail workers at the moment? Is his name Lynch? Can't remember. Whatever his name is. At least he has got, what do the Americans say? The cojones. At least he's got the balls to stand up and say, what we've got here is not right. We need to do something. Now, whether he'll be successful, I don't know. Whether he'll get all his demands met, I don't know. Is he doing it for his own personal profile? Yeah, quite possibly. I got that impression with Arthur Scargill as well, quite possibly. But ultimately, there is a bunch of working men and women who are being put upon by major organisations and partly by the government, and somebody is standing up for them. Am I a Scargill fan? No. Am I a Lynch fan? No. But at least they're standing up for them. Mick says, totally fucking agree, Jim. Peter says, £520 fee for an MVQ card, which makes a card valid for 5 years before renewal, means you're paying 40p a day to work on a construction site. When you whittle it down like that, not a great deal of money. But again, here we are with another thing. MVQ valid for 5 years. Why? We've already said in this morning's show of the way that innovation and change has been stifled. Is the demolition industry or the construction industry or the construction equipment industry or the groundworking industry going to change so radically over the next 5 years that the workers within it will have to go back and relearn their jobs? Will it? Peter says, I'm angry because you're spot on, Jim. Jim, come and sit here. Mick says, hell's bells, don't mention slavery. You'll get Lord alone knows who on your back. Yeah, listen, chance I'm willing to take. Forced to pay to work is called a racket, but like organised crime, bit like organised crime and protection money. Yeah. Yeah. And how have we allowed that? This is the bit that gets my goat the most, is the fact that as an industry we have stood by and allowed these systems to evolve and to take hold. And you only got to look back a few months. Look at the way in which the industry reacted, or more specifically, failed to react, when we were told we were going to lose red diesel. But it was dressed up in a different way, but we were basically told, in rough terms, your fuel bills, yeah, they're going to go up by about 70 odd percent. Because we're doing away with red diesel. You'll have to buy white diesel. We will be monitoring and so on down the line. Immediately, we saw an increase in fuel thefts, which is one side of the argument. But you would have thought, bearing in mind all of these trade bodies, CPA, NFDC, Federation of Master Builders, all of these hoity-toity organisations should and could have got together and said, "Oi, Chancellor, on your bike, pal. Ain't happening. Not on our watch. And I tell you what, if you try to impose this, we're going to shut up shop." The argument never took place. We just, yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir, we'll do that. They filled in a few forms. We've got exactly the same thing with embodied carbon at the moment. There is a genuine move, and it's gaining momentum to largely outlaw demolition. And the powers that be in demolition are just, yes, sir, that's fine. Oh no, we've filled in a form, and we're going to have a joint meeting with somebody, an organisation that nobody's ever heard of, to talk about it. Peter says, I used to do door-to-door sales when I was younger. I had to buy my own stock to sell at a reduced rate so I could make a measly profit. Con. Slavery. A condition of having to work very hard without proper remuneration or appreciation. I'll just leave that hanging there. And I'll leave you to decide how you think that aligns. Bearing in mind, I get probably about once every 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, I get emails, press releases about the dangers of modern slavery. And it's always talking about sort of people that have been trafficked into the country and forced to work, not just in construction, but worked across the board, in hospitality and what have you. And they're forced to work under very, very poor conditions. How's that any different to what a lot of people in this industry are forced to endure? I said this at the beginning of a monologue I did a couple of weeks ago. We used to send children up chimneys, and we stopped. Well, child labour, never a great idea. But, sending children up chimneys, very, very bad for their health. A lot of them died. We looked at it after a long while of doing it and went, do you know what? We can't do that anymore. We have known for decades and decades, that the biggest killer outside of asbestos, the biggest killer accidental-wise in the UK demolition industry is working from height. Falls from height are the biggest killer. Still do it, though. Still do it. We even have a qualification for it. Top man. You're not called top man because you are the top man. You're called the top man. Traditionally, you were the top man because they paid you a little bit more because you were brave enough / daft enough to work at extreme heights. It's danger money, basically. We know that's a big, big killer. Have you seen anything that has started to move us away from that? Apart from risk assessments, which is a whole story in and of itself. I've assessed that risk. Is it safe then? Well, no, it's still risky, but, I've assessed it. I've assessed it, and, working at height is unquestionably dangerous. So should we not do it then? Oh, no, you crack on. You get up on top of that building. Yeah. That's spot on, Mr. Norton. When are you truly appreciated for anything you do? When, indeed. Jim, wage labour is a socio-economic relationship between a worker and employer where the worker sells their labour power in exchange for payment. There's a whole other argument, and this is a whole other can of worms. But we still live in an age whereby you, as it says there, you are selling your labour power in exchange for payment. Does that not feel like an outmoded way of doing it? We've got a bunch of people here, all of whom, or most of whom, drive machines. But you will all do so to varying levels of competence. And not just competence. We might have in our midst somebody that is absolutely unbelievably good on a backhoe loader. Maybe not quite so good on a dump truck. We could have somebody here who is exceptionally good at a dump truck, maybe not so good on an excavator. And so if you want to get somebody to drive an excavator and you want an excavator expert, you should pay them for their expertise, not just their time. Because when you think about what they will bring to that project, your project will be finished more quickly, it will be finished more effectively and accurately, and it will be finished more safely. So it's not just a case of they clocked in at 7:30, they left at 5:30 or whatever it might be. They brought their expertise to bear, their valuable, time-earned, time-served expertise. Not just the sweat from their brow, but what actually lurks behind their brow, their brain power. Do we do that? No. In my game, they do. I can charge more to do a video than somebody that's got, an iPhone and, 200 followers on Instagram, because I've got that, Jim Taylor says, building on a street-by-street basis is also better for farming, as huge tracts of lands isn't taken out of the food production and left doing nothing for years, as it is when large development starts. I wonder if that's one of those things that we're going to be looking at in the fullness of time. I know there's a lot of talk about chopping up agricultural land and forestry land for things like palm oil production and stuff like that. There's something that might come and get us, I think, on that. Sorry, mate. They try to sell their labour at a good rate, but the employer will dictate the price. MVQ valid for 5 years. So what does 50 odd years in the game mean? 10 lots of MVQs. Each of them almost identical, I would guess. It's exactly the same argument we have about the constant renewal of things like asbestos awareness cards. It's impossible, and I would sit in front of anyone that tells me otherwise. Unless between now and this time next year they invent a new form of asbestos or a new asbestos disease. Once you've done an asbestos awareness, once you are aware of what asbestos is, what it can do, and where you're likely to find it and what it looks like, why did it do that again? In all likelihood, you probably haven't had a blow to the head. That information hasn't just fallen out of your left ear. You know that now. MVQ is a lifetime award. Lifetime cost, possibly. Gary Muirhead says, good morning, Mark. Good morning, gang. Sorry I'm late. Not a problem at all, Gary. It's always good to have you here. Let's have a look. A driving license is valid for virtually life and you don't need to prove your competence. Yeah, I mean, I'm going through this situation. Well, I say I am. I'm not really, because I'm only indirectly linked. But I was on the verge, before my father passed away, I was on the verge of basically applying to have his driving license withheld. Basically because I didn't think he was safe for himself or anybody else on the road. He was still qualified to drive, but I didn't think it was a good idea. He passed away before I was forced to do that. But, that was my feeling. But I've now got my father-in-law, who is mid-80s, not particularly good health. He's on dialysis and, he's had a heart attack or two. He's got issues with his kidneys and everything else. Is that somebody you really want on the road? Should he be granted a license? And yet he is. Legally, he is granted a license. And listen, it's not I don't have a dog in the fight. It's not my circus, not my monkeys. I don't need to intervene with this. But you've got somebody there who is going onto public roads legally, completely legally, question marks over whether he should. And yet when it comes to this industry, be it demolition or construction, you have to have these cards updated annually, every 5 years, whatever it might be. Why? Have you become less of a groundwork? Have you become less of a demolition operative? Probably not. Demtech BV just joined us over on Instagram. Love your work, fellas. Thank you very much indeed for being here. The MVQ is, but your CPCS or MPOS card is valid for 5 years, Mick says. Peter, sorry, Mick, my life award was done on site. It's not out of a book. I'm being talked to by someone who has never picked up a hook or a mattock, picked up a mattock in his life. Indeed. Jim Turner says the whole government ministers committee member heads of organisations honour system is just a big boys club. How often do we use the term boys club on this show? Daily? Pretty much. It's people that are all swimming in the same pool, having meetings on expenses, pulling each other's strings. All this stuff is cut and dried before it reaches the masses, and the people are promised something better in the future if they don't rock the boat now. Again, a racket. A racket indeed it is. It would seem I'm shit at everything. Being a dad, being a construction worker, even just living. What the fuck am I still doing here? Wouldn't be the same without you, Peter. Wouldn't be the same without you. Chris Ford, there's a driving license job. The driving license job is on the change. There's a lot of elderly drivers about. There's also a lot that have never passed a British driving test. Yeah, I mean, that older thing, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know how far back the driving license dates. But when you think about the way that we've when you think about the way that the health service and care homes and that sort of thing have been forced to change because people are now living much, much, much longer. When the driving license was introduced, did they take into account that we could have people in their 80s, 90s, possibly even their hundreds still on British roads? I bet they didn't. Mick says, my point on MVQs is that saying it has an expiry date, expiring at the 5-year point is incorrect. It's for life. Ah, okay. I didn't say the MVQ was valid for 5 years. I said the card was valid for 5 years. Okay. So what happens after 5 years? Do you have to renew your card? Is there a cost associated with that? But you was A1 with a hula hoop. Sorry, dinner ladies reference. Couldn't resist. Didn't watch it. Passed me by completely. And I can drive a car better than 70 to 80% of the population of the UK. As a former haulage driver, I'm sure that is absolutely the case. Chris, you're spot on about foreign driving licenses. Could well be. Could well be. And bearing in mind, we're not unique, but we are semi-unique in that we drive on the correct side of the road. Yes, you have to renew your card. Yes, costs a few quid. Mick says, okay, comrades, a quick verse of the old red flag and a bacon sandwich and hound walkies time. Bacon sandwich and a cup of tea. That sounds, well, in actual fact, the last part of that, bacon sandwich, cup of tea and hound walkies time, ideal way to spend your morning. Not listening to this twat babbling on about whatever it is he's babbling on about. So everybody, how about you go and have a good day and try to ignore the fact that you are being controlled. When you see this video or the video of the monologue go up, have a look at the thumbnail that I've done for it. It'll give you an idea of what my belief is. Peter says, most EU drivers have passed a more stringent test than we do in the UK. Is that right? Mick Norton says, driving licence commenced in 1903. Good Lord, and they cost 20 shillings a year. Wow. And Mick says, stay safe, fellas. Catch you later. Bye all and have a great day. Yeah, well, as everybody is leaving, although, funnily enough, the chat is still well populated, I think we'll call it a day. We're going to draw a line in the sand. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'll try and do something a little bit more cheery ahead of the budget because, frankly, I think tomorrow afternoon is going to be like a repeated kick to the knackers, I think, to use the vernacular. So, yeah, try and do something a bit more cheery tomorrow. We shall see. And then back on Thursday to actually look at the potential impact of all of this. Don't know if any of that we've done over the last hour and 15 minutes made any sense whatsoever, but I enjoyed doing it. So I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day, fellas.